Hi everyone, today we are going to present the research paper about financial development and self-employed. The authors are Papa Kananulak and Ekasha Siri Sankanan. The purpose of this study is aimed to understand how financial development affects self-employment. While many factors influence self-employment, but there is limited direct evidence on the impact of financial development. Self-employment, where people work for themselves instead of a company, is commonly worldwide, especially in developing countries. While it can have both good and bad effects on the economy, many experts believe it mostly has a negative impact. That's why organizations like the International Labor Organizations and governments are trying to decrease the self-employment. Factors like tax, job market restriction, and how well government institutions work are thought to be important. However, there hasn't been much research directly looking at how the development of financial system affects self-employment, even though there's evidence suggesting it's important. So this study aimed to understand how financial development influences self-employment. There are two main ideas about this. First idea is financial development might directly encourage people to start their own businesses, known as the supply push hypothesis. Strong financial system make it easier for individuals to access funds, potentially encouraging them to start a business. However, the decision to become self-employed is multifaceted and depend on factors like the comparative benefits of self-employment versus traditional employment. In essence, while financial development can facilitate entrepreneurship by providing financial resources, the choice to start a business remains complex and influenced by various factors. And the second idea is financial development might indirectly affect self-employment by changing how the economy grows, called the demand pool hypothesis. As financial systems develop, the economy typically expands, resulting in more job opportunities within larger companies. Consequently, fewer individuals may for self-employment as working for others become more appealing due to increased job availability. In summary, financial development influence on economic growth can indirectly shape self-employment rate by altering the attractiveness of traditional employment versus entrepreneurship. However, no one has directly studied how financial affects self-employment, so this study wants to explore it. They use a new measure of financial development created by the International Monetary Funds and also look at how well government institutions work because that can also affect self-employment. By analyzing data from different countries and years, they hope to understand the relationship between financial development, government effectiveness, and self-employment better. So how does finance relate to self-employment? Finance and self-employment have a close connections, affected by different ideas. One idea is the supply push hypothesis, which suggests that financial development can directly influence whether people decide to work for themselves or not. There are two main ways this can happen. First is the occupational choice model. It says that if people have enough money to start a business, they might choose self-employment. Second is the firm choice model. It looks at the cost and benefit of starting a formal business versus working informally. Financial development might affect whether people choose to start formal businesses or work informally for themselves. Another idea is the demand pool hypothesis, which says that change in self-employment can happen because of how the economy grows. For example, if there are more formal job opportunities due to financial development, fewer people might end up working for themselves out of necessity. This could reduce the number of people who have to resort to self-employment because they couldn't find other work. So, in simple terms, financial development can impact self-employment directly by making it easier or harder to start a business, and indirectly by affecting the overall job market and making formal jobs more available. Next part is the selected literature review. Firstly, researchers like Evans and Jovanovic in 1989 examined how access to money impacts entrepreneurship. While some suggest wealthier individuals are more likely to start businesses, others find the link less evident. And secondly, scholars such as Straub in 2005 and Mecenat and Straub in 2011 proposed that stronger financial systems lead to more formal business structures. The quality of institution plays a significant role in this process. And lastly, King and Revens in 1993 study initiate exploration into how financial development drives economic growth. Countries with robust financial systems tend to grow faster, potentially reducing self-employment as formal job opportunity increase. However, differencing perspectives exist. Some, like Carlos and Rosales in 2009, argue that as financial systems improve, more people may opt for formal employments. Conversely, Scaffers and Stenier in 2014 found that better financial system can lead to faster business growth, potentially encouraging more formal employment and less self-employment. Overall, the literature presents varying viewpoints on how finance impacts self-employment, with some suggesting it could lead to more formal jobs, while others believe it might encourage more people to work for themselves. For data collections, the study gathered data from diverse sources, including the World Bank, IMF, and other international economic organizations. This data encompass various aspects relevant to the study objective, such as self-employment rate, financial development indicators, government institution indicators, and macroeconomic variables like GDP per capita, trade openness, foreign direct investment, government consumption, and tax revenue. The independent variable can be divided into three groups, comprising government institution indicator, financial development indicator, and macroeconomics variable or control variables. Let's go into detail for each one. First is financial development indicator. Financial development indicator play a crucial role in economic activities. It encompasses the depth, access, efficiency, and stability of financial system. The study primarily utilized the IMF FD index, which provide a comprehensive assessment of a country's financial system. Second is the government institution indicator. The quality and effectiveness of a country's government institution significantly impact economic activities, including self-employment. Factors such as tax burdens, regulations, and the efficiency of government service can influence individual decisions to become self-employed. The study utilized the Government Effectiveness Index as a proxy for assessing government institutions. Lastly is control variable. Various macroeconomics variables were considered to understand the broader economic context. These include GDP per capita, trade openness, foreign direct investment, government consumptions, and tax revenue. Figure 1 illustrates that as the Financial Development Index increases, indicating better financial development, self-employment tends to decrease. This trend holds true for both the Financial Institution Index and the Financial Market Index within the financial development. And Figure 2 shows a similar pattern indicating that as the Government Effectiveness Index improves, self-employment tends to decrease. These findings suggest a negative correlation between both financial development and government effectiveness with self-employment rate. However, further rigorous statistical analysis is required to confirm this relationship definitively. Table 1 displays summary statistics for countries' data across various income levels. Self-employment rate vary widely from 94.83% in low-income countries to 0.41% in high-income ones. These trends extend to macroeconomics indicators like GDP per capita, export, tax revenue, government consumptions, and foreign direct investment, which are highest in high-income countries and lowest in low-income ones. Government effectiveness score range from -2.5 to 2.5, with high and positive score in high income nations and low, negative score in low income ones. The Financial Development Index, comprising financial institution and financial market index, range from 1 to 0, with high income countries scoring 1 and low income countries around 0.045. The next section is the empirical specifications. This section aims to outline the specific method the study will employ to investigate the relationship between financial development and self-employment. They have formulated a regression equation to express how self-employment is influenced by various factors, and here is a breakdown. Dependent variables is self-employment, measured as the percentage of self-employed workers in the total labor force, and the independent variables are FD indicator, which capture aspects of the financial system function and development, government effectiveness index, which measure the quality of government institutions, control variables like GDP per capita, trade openness, foreign direct investment, government consumption, and tax revenues. Dummy variable for different income level of countries. The analysis employ panel data analysis to examine trends across countries over time. They start with the pool OLS locations and adjust for country difference using dummy variable. Random effect model capture variations in the relationship between variables across countries. The hypothesis predicts a negative link between financial development and self-employment. Theorize that better access to formal credit may reduce the need for self-employment. Additionally, they expect improved government institutions to decrease self-employment due to better regulation and support for formal jobs. They suspect the relationship between financial development and self-employment could be influenced by government institution quality. In simple terms, they believe that how well the government works may affect how financial development impacts self-employment rate. Therefore, the final specification include the interactions term between financial development and government institutional indicators.
Coming to the empirical result and the discussion section. First, the study analyzed the correlation between the self-employment, FD, which is the financial development, and government effectiveness. The figures show the Pearson correlation from all variables included in the model. It can be seen that all independent variables have a negative correlation with the self-employment. However, there is a strong positive relation between the FI index and the government effectiveness index. This is because many studies have shown that FD is related to indicator of government institution. To present the information more empirically, panel data analysis is performed. Self-employment was introduced as a dependent variable and other independent variables were used in the regression. There will be a total of 4 models, which are pool OLS regression, fixed effect, dummy variable regression, and the random effect respectively. We can see that in both the fixed effect and random effect model, estimation from the relationship between GDP per capita, trade openness, tax revenue, government consumption, FI index, and government effectiveness index have a significantly negative relate on the self-employment. In contrast, the relationship between the foreign direct investment and the FM index on self-employment is not statistically significant. Next, to select the most appropriate model, F-test can be used to measure this. The fixed effect appears to have a highly significant F-test statistic, showing that the cross-country effect plays a significant role. However, because the result of the random effect, which assume that the cross-country effects are random and fixed effect model were similar, a Hussman test was used to determine which model was a better fit. From the fact that the Hussman test value is significant, we can know that the fixed effect model is more appropriate. And because the fixed effect model is more appropriate, the next step is to use the wow test to measure whether adding the dummy variable into the model or not adding is more appropriate. The dummy that will be inserted is the country income dummy variable. From the wow x square, results are significant, so we know that the inserting dummy variable into the model will be able to explain the model better. Thus, the fitted model was the regression with the country income dummy variables. Once we have the fitted model, we will then talk about each independent variable. The results show that the GDP per capita has a negative relation with the self-employment at a 1% level of significance. It is known that when GDP per capita increase, self-employment decrease. Many articles support this evidence and can be observed from the fact that developed countries tend to have a downward trend of self-employment. Trade openness is another significant variable. The coefficient on trade openness is negative and statistically significant. This implies that an increase in trade openness trend to promote a greater formality. The study also found that the government consumption is significant at the 1% with a negative sign. They indicate that the bigger the size of the government, the lower the self-employment. The government putting more money into the economy create more employment and discourage entrepreneurship. In addition, the higher government spending indicate greater social security and welfare spending. This provides safety net from formal employment, but will also raise the opportunity cost of entrepreneurship, thus lowering the self-employment. The results also show a positive relationship between the foreign direct investment on self-employment. The foreign direct investment was used as a proxy from the business flexibility in an open economy. The impact of foreign direct investment on the self-employment arose through the flow of capital, knowledge, and skill when new capital enters the host country and recruits more employees. However, the employment impact will depend on the country and the type of the investment. Due to the lack of consensus, it is not possible to conclude what direction the impact of labor demand and foreign direct investment should have. Finally, the results find that the coefficient of the dummy variable is negative and statistically significant at the 1% level. Next is a study that focuses on the impact of FD on the self-employment. Thus, the FD index developed by the IMF was used as a proxy from the FD indicator. The figure represents the dummy variable regression showing the model with and without the interaction between the FI index and FM index. The result in the model without interaction revealed that the FI had a significantly negative relationship with the self-employment at the level of 1% by a large magnitude, whereas the FM has a significantly positive relationship with the self-employment at a level of 5%. The FM focused on the way that individuals and firms could diversify their savings and firms could raise money through the stock, bond, and wholesale money market. The positive relationship could be described by the supply push hypothesis. The greater FD shows negative liquidity constraint and aids entrepreneurship through the venture capital financing. In contrast, the negative relationship between FI and self-employment could be described by the demand pull hypothesis. Some workers who were formerly employed but retrenched because of the economic downturn then turned to be self-employed. Therefore, FD may reduce this type of the self-employment using a finance growth relationship. When the interaction between the FI and FM is included in the model, the result could examine the highly significant positive relationship in the interaction term, and both the FI and FM would have a significantly negative relationship with self-employment at a level of 1%. The study investigated that the FM was not developed in the low-income country and was also not well developed in many low-middle-income countries. Therefore, more developed FI trend to reduce the self-employment in the general, but to be a lesser extent in the country with a better developed FM. In other words, the two act as substitutes. However, the FD does not only direct and correlate the individual by themselves, as indicated by the supply push hypothesis, but also it can contribute to the economic growth and then increase employment in the formal section, as explained by the demand pull hypothesis. Consequently, this action can eventually lead to lower self-employment. Moreover, the study also examined the impact of the government effectiveness on the self-employment. The results show that the coefficient of the government effectiveness index is negative and statistically significant. This implies that the improving government effectiveness can substantially reduce self-employment. As explained earlier, the granting access to the credit market should be coordinated with the improving public institution to achieve the formality. Therefore, the study proceeds further to examine this issue by including the interaction term between the FD indicator and the government effectiveness index. The results show that the coefficient of the interaction term between the FI index and the government effectiveness index is positive and statistically significant, whereas the FM index is not significant. This result implies that the impact of FD on the self-employment is lower when the improvement of the government institution is better, which show that the institutions are the most important determinant of the self-employment. In conclusion, the study examined the impact of FD on the self-employment, which its impact may include either the supply push and demand pull or both. The study used a new variable developed by the IMF in the regression model, the FD index, which is divided into the FI index and FM index. And as the government institution is also a main factor influencing self-employment, government institution is included as an independent variable in the model. Panel data analysis including the pool model, fixed effect model, and random effect model has been carried out. The hypothesis is that there was a negative relationship between the FD and government institution on self-employment. The study also includes the interaction term between each FD indicator with the government effectiveness index to examine their relationship to each other. The result from the empirical study found out that the FI index has a negative significant impact on the self-employment by a substantial magnitude. This is consistent with both the supply push and demand pull hypothesis. Moreover, the relationship between the government effectiveness index and self-employment is found out to be a negative and statistically significant. This result underlies the importance of institutional factor on self-employment. Furthermore, the impact of FD on self-employment is lower when the government institutions are improved. This suggests that countries with a low or moderate improvement of government institutions should focus on reduce the self-employment through the use of FD. However, it seems that the country with the high improvement in government institution needs to focus on other policy, as this will reduce the impact of FD-related policy. Finally, by including a dummy variable on the national income in the model, we know that the self-employment is highest in the low-income country. Therefore, to reduce the self-employment, implementing FD employment policy will help this country. In addition to reduce self-employment, it also helps develop the economy.